Sounds True presents From Fear to Fearlessness, teachings on the 4 great catalysts of awakening with Pema Chödrön, recorded in front of a live audience during a meditation retreat at Gampo Abbey. Ordained in 1974 as a Tibetan Buddhist nun, Pema Chödrön is the director of Gampo Abbey and is an acharya, or master teacher, in the lineage of Tibetan meditation master Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche, founder of the Shambhala Institute. And now Session 1, Developing Inner Strength and Trust with Pema Chödrön.
When we take the meditation posture, we're developing a posture and an attitude of attentive openness to whatever arises. And this is actually a very brave thing to do. I think maybe we wouldn't actually even begin on this journey if we knew how brave that is. In the Shambhala teachings, they have a beautiful image, which I love very much, which is to place the fearful mind in the cradle of loving kindness. And that's the notion of Maitri, loving kindness. To place this fearful mind in the cradle of Maitri. And there's another wonderful Shambhala teaching which says that if you don't get to know the nature of fear, then you'll never know fearlessness. This is a good one to write down in your notebooks to remember. Because we are so uncomfortable with fear, we're so uncomfortable with discomfort, that we just want to get away from it. Therefore, that's the definition of ego. It's just trying to get away from direct experience. And that's what weakens us. That what never adds up to inner strength, and it never adds up to some kind of unshakable trust. It just makes us more scared and more uptight, and saddest of all, it isolates us and cuts us off from each other, whereas the real healing will only happen from our interconnectedness with each other, realizing our interconnectedness with each other. But this tendency to try to get away, this deep, deep desire to want to get away, cuts us off from other people and from our own emotions and thoughts. So we place this fearful mind, which is known by everybody in the species from beginningless time, we place it in the cradle of Maitri. Now I want to say about Maitri, first of all, I think it's interesting to know that Trungpa Rinpoche taught Maitri in a way which is rather unusual. He's not the only person in the world that taught it this way, but it's not the typical way of teaching Maitri. Maitri is usually taught as developing the wish for others to be happy. Therefore we have the chant, may all beings enjoy happiness and the root of happiness. And that line refers to Maitri. So usually when Maitri is taught, it's this wish for others to be happy. And this is a very important part of Maitri. But the way that Trungpa Rinpoche taught, his definition of Maitri was unlimited, unconditional friendliness towards oneself, which then naturally radiates out to others. So I'd like to describe a little bit of how this works. First of all, when we think of Maitri, usually we think of qualities like gentleness and compassion, kindness, tender-heartedness, giving ourselves a break, non-judgmental attitude. But one should realize that a very, very important part of Maitri is honesty. The journey of development of Maitri is very much away from self-deception, away from this tendency to try to avoid what's going on. And it begins with making friends with what's going on in your own mind, with your own emotions, in your own body. Developing a truly unconditional friendliness towards your own mind, your own emotions, your own body. Generally speaking, when we look closely at anything, our judgments go along with it. And this is particularly true of when we look closely at ourselves. I remember very clearly when I was starting out on the path of meditation and the Buddhist teachings that I was always hearing about Maitri, and it was described as making friends with oneself. And I remember one day just raising my hand. It was like year 5 or 4.5 or something. I was about that far into it, just raising my hand and saying, I don't get it. The more I sit and get to know myself, the more I hate myself, because I see all this stuff. So it doesn't seem to me that it's adding up to friendliness. And that was sort of the beginning of me beginning to understand that part of this was seeing all of this really clearly, that clearly, to the point of actually beginning to long for it to lift, to not want anymore to harm myself in that way. So that a great yearning could arise to no longer want to be imprisoned by my own habits. But along with that, there had to be an enormous quality of compassion for oneself. And from that, I heard the teachings that we should realize that anything we see about ourselves is our introduction to realizing what other people are also feeling and thinking and seeing. To realizing the habits that every being is captured by, and beginning to have good heart towards humanity as one finds it in oneself, and then beginning to give other people a break as you start to give yourself a break. So this honesty is really important, and I think often people would like to just skip over it and just be sweet to themselves, which could easily fall into the 3 lords of materialism. In other words, in the name of Maitri, you just get real addicted to things and ideas and states of mind, because all of them make you feel so good, and that's Maitri, right? Feeling good. But actually, Maitri is just feeling whatever you feel with a compassionate attitude and with extreme honesty. As the days of your life go on, moving closer and closer to a direct experience of yourself with Maitri. I also remember asking in the early days, and many people have asked this of me and of other students who are giving teachings, and that is, why doesn't this lead to further self-absorption? Why doesn't this lead to further clinging? Why doesn't this just build ego up? Well, why doesn't it? It seems like it could. In fact, I got a letter just yesterday from someone saying, I think there can be too much Maitri. And then he said that in his Dharma study group, he saw a lot of people who were working with Maitri, and it seemed to him that they just kept never looking out, never reaching out. They just kept going round and round with their own stuff, making friends with it. But somehow it was like a straitjacket of friendliness. And I thought that was a very good point. That ideally what this process is that to the degree that we know ourselves completely, to that degree we can relax and open outward. We don't feel the need to protect what we know. The protection always comes from wanting to protect ourselves from having to feel something, or think something, or have something happen to us. But if we know it really well already, if we know those emotions, if we know our emotions very directly and intimately, if we know our thoughts, then they cease to scare us. And they can come and they can go like clouds in the sky. Sometimes more like hurricanes in the sky, or tornadoes in the sky. But nevertheless, one can hold one's seat with mindfulness and Maitri and weather these storms. So, when you experience fear, realize that it is part of life, and it's definitely part of growth, and it's definitely part of shedding very old, crippling patterns. But these patterns, we're addicted to them, so there's going to be a real process that goes on. So one should place that fearful mind in the cradle of loving kindness and work with mindfulness and Maitri. I'd like to introduce the bodhicitta practice of Maitri and Karuna, the actual formal practice of arousing the feeling of Maitri, then letting that radiate out. And in keeping with the three noble principles, I would very sincerely like to make the aspiration that this benefits all of us. And in particular, that something begins to transform in us, and that transformation leads us from suffering to happiness, and at the most profound level of really beginning to, as a result of this practice, get the notion of what is the root of happiness, what causes it to expand and flower, what causes it to grow rather than to decrease. And beginning to get the actual sense in our everyday life at a non-conceptual level, just at the level of our being, of what is it that causes suffering, what is the root of suffering, so that we might be able to speak and act and think, live our lives in a way where suffering for ourselves and others begins to de-escalate, where there's less suffering. I think it's important to realize that we don't evolve alone. These qualities in us, they don't happen in isolation. They happen in relationship to other people. It's compassion for ourselves and others that causes the compassion to increase and the suffering to decrease. It doesn't happen in isolation. And in that regard, I think it's quite inspiring to realize that if one person can connect with what is the root of happiness and the root of suffering and begin to live their life that way, if one person can connect with this spark of bodhicitta so that it grows, and this capacity to open our minds beyond narrow-mindedness and closed, painfully self-centered views, if even one person can do that, to the degree that one person can do that, it makes it easier for the rest of us. So we evolve together. To the degree that some people are beginning to get the hang of this, you can count on the fact that many other people all over the globe are beginning to get the hang of this. So a very important point is to continue to contemplate this and just to notice. You can read what the teachings have to say on it, but actually notice in your own experience what words make things better and what words make things worse in terms of suffering. What actions make things worse and what actions make things better. This has enormous power. Just beginning to see our ability to turn that around comes from being able to see how certain things actually make the pain increase and other things cause us to lighten up and open. So the first practice that we'll do is the Maitri practice. And as I say, what makes it limitless is the recognition that we're really wishing for ourselves and others to enjoy the root of happiness, to find out what is the root of happiness, to actually begin to turn things around. So we will begin by, you could say, arousing bodhicitta, which is to say, just arousing the wish that we be happy. May I enjoy happiness and the root of happiness. And you may feel that right now you don't have a sense of what the root of happiness is, but the whole point is that this is a practice in starting exactly where you are, and then gradually beginning to think bigger. And starting exactly where you are is like shut down, closed off as you might be feeling, and realizing that over time, your capacity to feel will begin to expand. So thinking bigger and feeling bigger as well. As someone said, these practices sort of stretch your heart and stretch your mind. But what is said is that the essential spark is within all of us. The basic, kind heart is in us. And this is like tapping into it, like tapping into a spring. And in the beginning, maybe you just make a tiny hole and just a few little drops are coming out. And then maybe that's all you do is you just make a little hole. And then the force of the living water causes that hole to get bigger and bigger of its own accord until there's just a river of flowing, fresh, good water coming out. So if you can just make a little pinpoint in the narrowness of your heart and mind by doing these practices, you can really trust that you can go from frozen to begin to melt. Something can begin to melt of its own accord. But we do have to make this kind of initial aspiration, or if you don't want it to happen, it won't. It has a lot more to overcome. We're going to start the practice with ourselves. This is the way that some people teach it. Some people say, oh, well, you're supposed to start with what is easiest. Therefore, you start with yourself. Well, I remember presenting this once to someone, and the whole room burst into laughter, because for many, many people, the most difficult of all to do the Maitri practice for is oneself. This is extremely helpful to see this and to make this gesture of kindness towards yourself, that you start with yourself. The other reason for starting with oneself is that it's said to the degree that you can arouse the wish for yourself to be happy. To that degree, it becomes easier for you to wish for others to be happy in a genuine way, in a really true way. So that it's not just like conceptual, good people wish for others to be happy, and therefore you kind of mouth the words. But you don't really activate the feeling of love in you. There's no warmth that actually starts to spill out. So we start with ourselves, and then the second one, we expand it. The idea here is you start with this little pinpoint, and then you expand it out, which can be, as people often say, it feels like just mouthing words. It feels completely made up. But this is the kind of pretending that is really useful for you. So don't feel like you're being a hypocrite or something. You're not really trying to make yourself feel something. You're just simply arousing the thought. And if you do it on a daily basis, you'd be surprised at how the power that arousing this thought has to make something actually genuine begin to happen. So you can feel very cold and very cut off, and as if you're just mouthing words, just pretending. But at least during your stay here, give it a fair chance. And then if you can continue for a year with this practice of just experimenting, saying, well, let's just see what happens here. See if something doesn't begin to move and change in you of its own accord, just by your willingness to turn in the direction of even saying the words that you wish for yourself to be happy and you wish others to be happy. Then we move on to the people that when we think of them, we automatically feel gratitude. And as I say, this doesn't have to be a person, it can be an animal. A lot of people find that it's their dog or a dog they used to have or a cat they used to have or something that they feel this love for in a simple, uncontrived unintellectual, uncomplicated way. But in any case, the idea here is to get in touch with that genuine feeling of gratitude and love. I'm going to present it this way, of starting with oneself and moving on to the person or the beings. But if you wish, when you're doing this yourself, to start with the person on your list, you can do that, because the idea is you sort of start with something that you already feel. You start with something that's already genuine, that doesn't feel contrived. And the idea is that you spend most of the time working on that. You spend most of the time wishing for this person that you feel gratitude to. We'll spend most of our time wishing for them to be happy, to enjoy happiness and the root of happiness. If they've died long ago, it doesn't matter. You can still do it for them. They don't have to be alive. The idea of this is that it does benefit others, but the reason it benefits others is because it starts to unlock this frozen quality in your own being, and something begins to move and melt. And this is the idea. Love can begin to spread. So first we have to do our best to just feel it at all. Then we move on to a very close friend. Now, we may have some complicated feelings about this close friend, but we move on to someone that we really feel is our good friend, and we wish for them to be happy. May they enjoy happiness and the root of happiness. And then we move on to a neutral. If someone says, do you like them? Then you'd say, sure, and but it's not like strong attraction or strong aversion. It's just neutral. The teachings always say that most of the people in our lives fit into this category. The neutrals. Sort of sounds like science fiction. And now we'll do it for the neutrals. And then we move on to the hardest one, which is the enemy. It's said that it's best not to start with someone you actually hate, someone that you resent so much that when you think of them, your whole being closes down. Someone who has harmed you in a way that all you really want is revenge. You just can't even entertain the thought of even wanting them to be happy. You just want them to suffer because they caused you to suffer. It's said it's better not to start with those people because it's too overwhelming. It's asking too much of ourselves. Nevertheless, the unlimited quality of this is as you begin to work with what's workable over time, even these ones that seem impossible, to wish that they enjoy happiness and the root of happiness, that it spontaneously something begins to shift and change in us. Not mentally, not forcing it, not pretending. And you should just wait for it to happen like that so that you can trust it and it doesn't feel overwhelming. So when you get to the enemy, I think you can come up with plenty of people that you just feel resentment towards. So enemy may be kind of a big term, but basically it's someone that you feel negativity towards in some kind of a smaller way. Resentment, irritation. And you might say, well, I also like them, and it's complicated like that. Well, just zero in on the not liking them part. And actually see if you can do this, which is to hold in your heart at the same time the not liking and then also wishing for them to enjoy happiness and the root of happiness. And what I've noticed is that not only do you become emotionally more able to give, to reach out, to feel more alive emotionally and more interconnected with others, but a lot of insight begins to dawn. It's also with the level of the mind and heart being so inseparable are actually the same thing. Enormous insight begins to dawn. And what's happened with me, and a lot of people have said the same thing to me, is that it begins to dawn on you that if you really wanted to be free from suffering, if you personally really wanted to be free from suffering, you would wish for the perpetrators of violence and cruelty to enjoy the root of happiness, to understand what causes happiness, and you would wish for them to understand the root of suffering, because then they wouldn't be hurting people anymore. This getting even, you see, this is the old-fashioned, stuck way of thinking about things. We are like this. Human beings are like this, but this is an attempt to change that. Wanting to get even just perpetuates the cycle of cruelty. And we can't help it if right now we want to get even. There's no point feeling ashamed of ourselves. You see, that's what we do. We heap blame on top of blame. I would say you can't force it, but it does begin to dawn on you that what would really change things is if even the greatest horror story in our life, if those people or that person could truly enjoy the root of happiness and know the root of suffering, that the whole cycle of pain would end, would de-escalate, and would slowly cease to be, and that would spread. Instead of generation after generation, the same cruelty continuing, generation after generation, something begins to slow down and change and shift, and love and compassion begin to grow instead of resentment and revenge. So then we universalize it to all beings everywhere. If you saw this photograph of the Hubble telescope out in space, it looks out in space and it sees that there are all these little dots and things, and each one is a galaxy. We don't know what's going on in those particular galaxies. But I think it's naive to think that all those galaxies, all the beings everywhere, have discovered the root of happiness and the root of suffering. There may be a lot of very confused beings out there. There may be galaxies that are in worse shape than ours, where the cruelty and violence and the cycle of pain is much more out of control than ours. And there may be galaxies where there's much more space, people realizing their true nature and the true nature of reality, and that the whole thing is much more open and kind and true. But when you think of all beings, you could just start with maybe Nova Scotia and move out to Canada, North America. You could just start with the globe, but you can make it as big as you want. Just that all the beings everywhere are suffering, and wish them all happiness and the root of happiness. Okay, so we're going to start with this first practice, starting with ourselves. I'm going to guide it, and then moving on to our list of people that we feel gratitude to. I'll give that more time, because that's the main point, is to actually connect with the heart. This is the beginning of trust in inner strength. It's beginning to connect with the heart, beginning to trust in the heart. This is where the inner strength and the trust come from. And then hopefully we can connect with that by just thinking a lot about this person, and then taking that feeling, once we've felt it and it's a real feeling for us, extending it out to our good friend or friends, and then extending it further to the neutrals, and then to the enemy, which, as I say, don't choose an overwhelming situation, and then to all beings. So first, arouse the wish, may I be happy, may I enjoy happiness and the root of happiness. Just arouse that feeling of love and kindness towards oneself. May I be happy, may I enjoy happiness and the root of happiness. The eyes can be open or closed. sincerely from the heart wish, may I enjoy happiness and the root of happiness. You may feel the need to do this for a long time, but at this point I'd like to say that whenever you feel ready, move on to a person or people that you feel gratitude towards. Actually say their name and arouse the wish, the sincere wish, may they enjoy happiness and the root of happiness. And if you want to go back and forth between yourself and this person or these people, that's okay. By contemplating in this way, may the love and gratitude that you feel for this person or these people, may it expand and grow, may it get stronger. When this feels genuine, when it feels true, not contrived, when you can really feel gratitude and love, radiate that out now to your good friend. Say their name, say their names, and wish that they enjoy happiness and the root of happiness. And when you feel ready, radiate it out further to people who you feel neutral about. You can say their names, visualize their faces, or just have a general sense and wish that they enjoy happiness and the root of happiness. And when you feel ready, extend further to people that you have negative feelings toward. You can say their names, visualize their faces. And arouse the wish that they enjoy happiness and the root of happiness. Knowing that this would benefit both of you. That you would benefit from this, as well as they would benefit from this. And when you feel ready, wish, may I be free of suffering and the root of suffering. May this person I love be free of suffering and the root of suffering. And my good friend and neutral people and the one whom I feel negativity toward, may we all be free of suffering and the root of suffering. And keep touching back in on the feeling that you have for your loved one, for yourself, and see if you can spread it out, radiate it out. And then when you feel ready, radiate this sincere wish, this feeling of love and gratitude, this feeling of wishing for beings to enjoy happiness and the root of happiness extended out to all beings, everywhere. Just have a sense of this feeling of love radiating out, unlimited friendliness radiating out in all directions.